Hello, I'm Nicolas Torero. I'm an executive at a K-12 virtual school in the US, and I also consult for a selected number of schools that are making at least $500,000 a year in revenue or that at least have 50 students. All of these schools come to me for various reasons, some of which they can solve via watching some of my YouTube videos. Sometimes they have questions around how do I stop competing based on tuition with other schools, be it public, home schools, or other private schools. Sometimes they have questions about how do I outcompete a school that has just a larger budget than I do. And some of those questions are answered within my YouTube channel. I'll show some of the videos right at the top, but you can also just scroll into my YouTube channel and answer some of those questions for yourself. But as those questions get solved and as you get those, let's say your revenue doubles or triples on your advertisement or your funnels or your emails based on some of the videos that you're watching of me, more in-depth questions will come up or more in-depth actions need to come in order to unlock once again those doubling or tripling of revenue that you're generating through different acquisition channels. Now this video is one of those more in-depth ones. It's one in which you will see how you can go from, and this is actually a pretty common situation that I see, but you can go from losing up to 3/4 of the amount of people that are interested in booking a call with you, let's say to talk to your admissions team or to book a shadow day, and actually go from that into gaining, at least 1/4 of those people. Now, this might not sound like an incredible achievement. You're telling me that I'm still losing 2/4 out of the people that are interested in booking a shadow day. Well, but you can run the numbers, and that's precisely, where this video was inspired from. I was recently working with a school. We were attracting about 4,000 people into a specific landing page, and we were getting about 150 people to fill up a form to actually join a shadow day. Out of those 150 people, we only had 40 people actually book a call. In an ideal state, we could go ahead and actually get all of those 150 people to book a call, but that does not mean that going from 40 to 60 or 80 is not good enough. Let's say you go from 40 people who book a call to actually getting 80 people to book a call. Well, if you're closing, let's say 1 out of 5 calls that you're having with those people, you can make the math around the thousands of dollars that you would make in revenue that would come from what seems to be a very unideal state to be in. Again, is there room to improve? For sure. But am I mad at the fact that in the past I closed 8 people, perhaps at, let's say, $10,000, which would be $80,000 in revenue? Am I mad from going from that to $160,000 in revenue that would come if I went ahead and went from 40 people to having 80 just because I could get 150? And again, these are the kind of math that you have to do if you're running an alternative education school and you actually want to stop being the best kept secret. If you have no idea about how to do it, in this channel, you're going to be learning some of these things based on these videos like this. But also, if you just literally have no idea about how to get those numbers or how to read them, go into the link of the description to see my 12-week program called the Right Families Method. I'll just go into your business, get those numbers myself, and then just revamp every single acquisition channel that you have, whether it's funnels, emails, ads, content. I'm not saying I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to literally do it, implement it within your business, and then I have all sorts of support systems such as mentorship and AI that sounds like me, and also a training library that is always growing so that once you unlock a business opportunity and you solve that problem and you hit a plateau, you can go ahead and actually solve another one and have the information to have that. But anyway, going back to the video, the important thing to know is the following. You're having a significant amount of people already coming into some of your channels. It might be a landing page, it might be people attempting to call you, it might be people attempting to fill up a form. And there are times in which we're okay with the numbers that we're getting because they just allow us to fund our operations. However, there's oftentimes also things that you can do within those individual funnels and acquisition channels so that without increasing the amount of money that you're spending, you can get better results out of it. I just told you that with this particular school, again, we were having 150 people fill up a form, and then we had 40 people book a call. Because of a change that I'm about to tell you, we actually started getting about 80 people book a call. It's still not the 150 people, but it's 40 people more than the 40 people that we were getting. And that's the whole thing to keep in mind. You're investing resources, why not make the most out of them? Now, getting into the more actionable part of the video, what was happening within this particular school? Well, what was happening with this particular school was various things. And again, these are not changes that you have to think about in the early stages if you don't even have a website or if your whole funnels are a mess. This is the kind of video that is helpful once you go through the foundations that are taught within my YouTube channel and are now ready to pinpoint things that are just harder to change or harder to notice. For this particular school, the challenge that we were facing was that, well, it seemed that the level of friction that we were adding before people could book a call was too significant. How did this look like? Well, we had two pages. We have a first page, we had a video sales letter was selling the school. But then we had some explanations about the value propositions within the school, and then people filled up a form. So that was page one. It ended up with people filling up a form. And then on the second page, people basically would only see some kind of, message, and then they would see a Calendly embed so that they could book a shadow day conversation with a staff member. When we implemented some of these changes when we started working together, many months ago, we actually saw way more revenue coming in faster than compared to the systems that they had in the past. However, at this point in time, it seemed to me that we could get way more. And that's precisely what we found out. And we found out by looking at some of those steps and actually being more critical about them. When I looked at the form, it seemed to me that the 8 questions that we were asking, while at some point they act as good friction because they stopped us from getting people who were just price shopping, at this point in time, they didn't make sense. They added way too much friction. People got tired of answering them, and a lot of them just dropped mid-form. Some people, though, they did fill up the form, so they counted for those 150 people that I was mentioning earlier, but they just rushed through the questions, meaning that even though they filled them up, we were not getting the kind of context that we were expecting to get through those forms anyway. Another issue that came up was that even though we only had 2 pages, which is a quite simple of a funnel, people dropped off between that point of filling up those forms and then going into the Calendly embed, because Calendly wasn't integrated to the form. What this caused was that people had to re-enter information such as answers to some questions that we were asking on Calendly, answers to what their name was, an email, and all these sorts of different things. And again, there was a point in time for this school in which all of this made sense. We needed to add friction. But because of other source of changes that we did, this level of friction was just being totally unnecessary. Very few people went ahead and actually filled out a form, and the people who did, then they saw Calendly and it was like, are you really going to ask me the same question? At one point, we thought about fixing some of these challenges by just getting someone to call a lot of the people that filled up a form. But even then, again, we couldn't go from that jump of getting only 40 people to book a call to getting 80 people. And those changes came when we did 2 crucial actions. So first, we simplified the form. We went from those 8 questions that we were asking on the form, and we only asked 4 questions that made the most sense. The questions that we really needed to know to qualify you. And then, rather than having a second page in which we had the Calendly, we actually embedded the Calendly within Typeform. So Typeform is a form and survey creation platform which a lot of you are familiar with. And one of the great things that it allows you to do is that you can just integrate Calendly within it. What this allows is that within that first page we have, now people will answer the questions and also will be able to book a call. It sounds like a little of a change, especially because people were answering questions anyway and then being redirected to a page in the previous type of funnel. But believe it or not, you will have people drop off the more pages you add into your funnel. In the case of this particular school, there were enough to, again, go from about 40 people booking a call to going to 80 people booking a call. And this number might look different for your individual school, but it might also be very similar. It might also be even more optimistic. The main point is that we reduced friction, we integrated everything within the first page, and we got more people to book a call. The other reason why we did, I believe, is that because everything was implemented or everything was integrated, not implemented, we could have people actually not have to repeat information, because by the time they got into the Calendly had already pre-filled most of the information that we were asking them. To step back a little bit and again add some context on why this is important for your business is that when I talk to a lot of people within the alternative education space, the hunch is always to just get more people in the door. They're always thinking, well, we could be publishing more content, sending more newsletters, hosting more open houses, webinars, maybe spending more money on advertisement, but usually they don't see that there's always a leakage, or there are at times a leakage within the mid funnel. So what is that mid funnel? Well, the top funnel would be the kind of people that, like any attempt that you're trying to get into getting people into a landing page. The bottom of the funnel might be considered, for example, as, how's the sales team performing? Well, for this particular school, the sales team was closing at least 1 person for every 5 calls, which was pretty good given the price point that we were having, which is tens of thousands of dollars. So when I look at all those things, I'm not thinking, well, they're not things that we could fix on the bottom of the funnel, or hey, it's not that we couldn't just spend more money on ads, but it's definitely telling me, well, if you're getting, again, 150 people to fill out a form and you're only getting 40 people to book a call, perhaps the best improvements that you can bring into the table are related to that mid-funnel type of metric. Because now you have to think about actually what unlocked for this school. It wasn't the hundreds of thousands of dollars that unlocked by just saying, hey, we went from 40 people to 80 people without increasing ad spend, without increasing content, without increasing anything on the top of a funnel actions that we were doing. But what's actually worthy of considering is the fact that if I were to increase the amount of content that I'm producing, if I were to increase the amount of advertisement that I'm doing, if I'm a sales-led school, school and I have people call, email in, or call in, then it means that now with the changes that I made for the mid funnel, it might be the case that the more people I get into the funnel, the more calls I'm gonna get out of it, compared to the state in which I don't go ahead and actually fit the funnel, at least in the way in which it was. So what in the first month of me working with this school looked like, oh, maybe we just added an extra $200,000 in revenue, which is pretty good. It might have looked like, hey, we just added $400,000 during high enrollment season because we just had the budget necessary to, let's say, double the amount of money that we were spending on advertisement. So I want you to do something right now. I want you to go ahead and look about the amount of people that are getting into whatever page in which you're asking them to do something related to a buying decision. As an example, it might be the page in which they can book, let's say, a call with your admissions team. I want you to see the number of people who are getting them. I want you to see the percentage of people who are actually filling up a form. And I want you to see the amount of people that are not only booking a call, but showing up to the call. If, like this school that I was working with, you're also having trouble getting people to actually go ahead and book the call because they drop off in whatever stage of the funnel, you have to ask yourself, is the amount of friction that I'm adding to the page too much as for allowing people to actually join a call? You don't have to necessarily revamp your entire page, but what you might do is that you can create an A/B test. You can have the same page that you're having, let's say a control page, and you can make it so that 50% of the people who are trying to get to that page get to this page, but the other 50% might go into another version of the page in which maybe you reduce some of the things. Maybe you rethink the questions that you're adding into the forum. Maybe you rethink the systems like I did that you're using to schedule calls. Maybe you make the page shorter. Maybe you go ahead and maybe you're having people move through 4 different pages. Maybe you try to see what happens when you only have 3. And a small caveat is that I don't want to make it sound as if the less content you add, the better leads you will get. Because something that might happen is that you reduce friction, but then you're getting people into conversations with your sales team, and your sales team is just tired of having to explain things over and over again that should be explained beforehand. You know, with one school, one of the questions that they were getting was actually, are you a paid school? So of course you don't want to have those questions. But if it is the case that you are adding way too much friction, and then you can share that information in some other point of the funnel, for example, after people book a call, maybe you send a few SMS, then it might make sense for you, as it did for this particular school, to reduce the amount of questions that you're asking, to reduce the amount of information that you're trying to give them, to reduce the amount of pages, and more importantly, simply to reduce the amount of steps and cognitive load that it might take a family who's interested in your school to actually make a decision to go ahead and talk to you. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you know that I don't hide the fact that once you solve a business problem, you're going to be solving another business problem. So something that might come up as you reduce friction is precisely that some people might not come as qualified to your conversations as they did in the past. One of the videos that I'm actually working with on the side, and that I'm just waiting to gather some data from one of my clients that just bought the Right Families method, is one video in which I'm focusing on what happens in the confirmation page. You know, once people book a call, well, what do they actually have to see within the page they get redirected to so that they come into your sales call, not just asking about price and whether this will work for my family, on what happens if this doesn't work, and instead coming into your sales call mostly just asking very nuanced questions about what's stopping them from joining. You can just address those, and you can just make the conversations about them rather than about yourself, about going over all the features and teachers and all that information that they could have seen beforehand. All that to say, I don't hide from the fact that once you reduce this friction, once you unlock hundreds of thousands of dollars, as we did for this school, there will be other challenges that you'll face, and for that, subscribe to the channel because I'm already working on that video around confirmation pages, and more importantly, on email sequences and SMS sequences that you better send people. So again, you're only getting people on sales calls who are ready to buy or who are at least 60% close to buying, rather than people who are just window shopping. At this school, the gap was between the form and the call, was what happened between the moment in which people actually express interest and then attempted to get on a call with you. For your school, it might be an entirely different thing. You know, it might be the case that your advertisement is targeting people that are not ready to buy. It might be the case that the content you're using is actually not replicating your sales process. So while it might be entertaining, it's not helping your sales team actually get more leads who are ready to buy. It might be the case that you don't even know where all of these data that I've been referencing comes through. So you cannot make decisions. Like for you, like the infinite options that you have to solve within your business all look the same. Well, in reality, there's always a single data point that is telling you, hey, if you fix me, you will unlock the most amount of revenue possible in the shortest amount of time. If your school has challenges that you perceive are keeping you as the best kept secret within your city, and you're ready to actually work with someone who's both an executive and who's already consulting for a selected number of schools, check out the Right Families method below in the link. Now, the Right Families method is a 12-week program which consists of 2 phases. The first phase, we're mostly diagnosing and building new materials for you. This looks like, for example, looking within your business, gathering data, or looking at data, assuming you have it, and finding what are the things that we have to change that if we did, we would get the most amount of revenue in the shortest amount of time. This might look as, for example, revamping your email sequences or SMS, maybe advertisement, maybe it might look as content, maybe it might look as funnels, maybe it might look as rewriting your entire website. Now, what's important to note here is not necessarily how the deliverable is going to look like, but about the fact that we're not going to be telling you simply, hey, this could be better, you can do this, and we're actually going to be designing and writing these things for you. The whole intention is that I want to guarantee that you implement what we tell you, so that as fast as 3 weeks to 4 weeks of working with us, meaning a week or two after you actually get the assets, you're already seeing revenue coming into your door. Not in the form as pipeline, but actually in the form as people actually inquiring and maybe giving you deposits, or maybe even enrolling within your school. The second phase comes as a result of the first one. Well, I could be super happy about the revenue that I bring to you over the first 2 weeks to 4 weeks. I also acknowledge the fact that new challenges will come and new opportunities to grow your business will come. And precisely because of that, we have this second layer, this second phase. And in this second phase, you have access to three things. The first one is an AI that sounds like me and that is trained on a lot of the actions that I take in the alternative education schools that I work with. You can actually call it, and it sounds just like me whenever you have questions about the ad copy that you should go with, or maybe if you should even run ads at all. The second thing that you'll have is group mentoring sessions, in which you'll be joining either me or my team, or sometimes other school founders, so that we can all diagnose and pinpoint what needs to be fixed within your business to unlock the most amount of revenue possible. And on top of that, just because I know that, like me, there are a lot of people who just like upskilling themselves all the time, we also have a growing training library with high leverage actions that you can take within your acquisition systems, so that again, you're always unlocking opportunities to not just grow revenue for the sake of it, but grow revenue so the sake of you can focus on what matters the most, which is changing lives within your school. If any of these sounds appealing to you, you can read more about the Bright Families method below. And more importantly, watch a short video in which I'm going over anything that you have to know to make a decision yourself.